Good morning. We are in Parshas Beha'aloscha. So we ended last week Parshas Naso. We said last week Naso was the longest of the individual Sedras in the Torah, 176 verses. Parshas Beha'aloscha follows on from that. In fact, we read Parshas Naso. We ended with the last 89 verses were all about the offerings brought by the Nasiim, the leaders of the tribes. And on Chanukah, that's our laning that we have for Chanukah. Because Chanukah is a rededication of the temple. When the Greeks had taken over the temple, we went back in, and so we rededicated it. Similarly, when they started the Mishkan, the Nasiim, the leaders brought their offerings. So we read on Chanukah all 12 offerings. And we do it over the 8 days, and then the last day we do the end part, which is quite a long laning, including the summary at the end of last week's Parsha. So we had last week's Parsha, each of the Nasiim brought their offering, and then we summarized it all and totaled it all up, and they all brought the exact same. Right, that was all last week. This week, and then on Chanukah, we carry on and we read the first part of this week's Parsha Beha'aloscha. Because Beha'aloscha starts with a command to Aaron. Hashem tells Moshe to tell Aaron to light the menorah. When you light the menorah, you light all the 7 lights. And the reason why we read it on Chanukah is it's the menorah. And Aaron wasn't one of the Nasiim. He was the head of the tribe of Levi. As the Kohen Gadol, he was the head of Levi. And he didn't think of bringing an offering. All other 12 tribal leaders, through prophecy or through their own, Hashem put in their heads, whatever it was, brought an offering. They all brought, as we said, the exact same offerings. And Aaron's standing there and saying, why didn't I think of this? And Hashem said, don't worry, because for all time you will be lighting the menorah. Now, we still today light a menorah on Chanukah. The Kohanim don't. In the temple times, the Kohanim light a menorah, the 7-branch menorah in the temple. We today still light a menorah on Chanukah for 8 days. We light an 8-branch menorah plus a shamish, but there's still that remnant that's left. For all times we will have Chanukah, and therefore Aaron was appeased. And so the Parsha continues straight from Naso into Beha'aloscha that we should light the lamps. There are lots and lots of different topics in this week's Parsha. And so we will go through them relatively quickly, high level, and then we'll come back to one part of it, which is what we have been doing recently. So the next section of the Torah is about the consecration of the Levium. Anybody who was going to be a Levi that was going to work in the Mishkan, to carry the Mishkan, the Kohanim worked inside the Mishkan. The Levium's job was to carry the parts when they were traveling. We were about to start traveling, and so now the Levium are told, you need to be consecrated in order to work in the Mishkan. And so Hashem says to Moshe, Kach es ha-Leviim, take the Levium from the children of Israel and purify them. What did they do to purify them? They had water sprinkled on them. They were shaved, head to toe. Their garments were immersed, that they were completely purified, immersed in the mikveh. They became pure. They brought offerings, bull and a meal offering. The meal offering being flour mixed with oil. A second young bull was brought, and then the Levim were brought to the Mishkan, to the Oil Moed, and they were gathered in front of everybody, and Moshe was told, put your hands on top of the Levim, do a smicha type thing. The concept of smicha, putting your hands on something, is really done in 2 situations. One is smicha, what we call smicha today, that a rabbi gets, is not the smicha of real rabbis until after the Second Temple, until sometime during the Mishnah Gemara period that stopped. And we can see that in the Talmud Bavli, most of the rabbis are called Rav. Whereas in the Yerushalmi and in the Mishnah, they're called Rebbe. A Rebbe is someone who had proper smicha. Proper smicha means his teacher put his hands on him and said, I'm giving over to you the tradition. You've got enough knowledge. That ended at some point 1800 years ago or thereabouts. It's been tried to resuscitate a few times over history. We're not there yet. One day it will be. So the smicha we get today is not a real smicha. It's a piece of paper. It means you've passed a few tests in order to say you're competent in certain areas of halacha. So they did smicha on them. And then we're told, Aaron was told to wave them. Aaron is this stage, an 84, 85-year-old man. And he's told to pick up all the Leviim, 7,000 Leviim, one at a time, and wave them, like we wave a lulav. Forward, backwards, up, down, left, right. 6 directions. Each person you have to pick up and wave them.
Wow.
And that's how they were consecrated. Then the Leviim are told they can come and serve in the tent of meeting. They're allowed to now do their part of the service. And there was the switch over because the firstborn were originally supposed to do it. For various reasons, the firstborn lost that right, and this is where they were redeemed. The Leviim and the firstborn swapped around, as we had in the Pasha a few weeks ago. Leviim were counted. We had 2 types of counts of the Leviim. One was from 30 to 50, and one was from 30 days and up. The 30 days and up was for all the Leviim in total. They were allowed to serve from 30 years to 50 years in the Mishkan. In the Beis HaMikdash, Leviim had certain jobs. They used to sing on the 15 steps. They sang the Shir HaMalos, the 15 Shir HaMalos, songs of ascent that they would sing every day. And that was their job. They played the musical instruments. They had various other tehillim and songs that they sang. And they were involved in a security process, let's call it, in the temple. They would be part of the guards that would stand around. The temple didn't need guarding. Hashem protected the temple. We had a process whereby people would stand guard in the temple. I'm just looking around and I omitted to say, welcome to our new shul. Yes, so we're in the new base Medrash, which is still in a process of being built. We're still renovating, but thank God we built and moved into this new All Center in Melbourne, which has just been phenomenal. 3 organizations co-located here at the moment, and it's been a beautiful start. So we look forward to lots more shiurim here. So Leviim, that was just a little interlude. Leviim from 25 to 30 went through a 5-year training program, and then they were allowed to be part of the process until they were 50 years old. Then we get to another section, let's call it second chances. Hashem tells Moshe that, okay, now we're in the 2nd year from the Exodus, it's time to bring a Korban Pesach. And this was the only Korban Pesach they actually brought in the desert. Because after this, when they were journeying, they never brought a Korban Pesach again until they got into the land of Israel. They were told, bring the Korban Pesach like you did in Egypt, and they are all ready to bring the Korban Pesach, and they bring it. But there are a few people who come to Moshe and say, we've got a problem. We are tameh. We are impure. A number of reasons are brought by Chazal as to why this group of people were tameh. Anybody who has come in contact with a dead person needs to be purified with the ashes of the red heifer, of the para aduma, and we will get to that parsha in a few weeks' time. They were in contact with dead bodies. It's brought, one of 2 reasons are generally brought. One is when Moshe was leaving Egypt, everybody ran around looking for gold and silver and clothing, and Moshe ran around looking for Atzmas Yosef, Joseph's bones. And these people were responsible for carrying Joseph's bones back to Israel. The other 12 tribes were also brought, and we know the burial place of many of them, including Kever Yosef. We know where that is. And people go there today when they can. It's sometimes a little bit difficult to get into Shechem. They call it Nablus. But there are people that are able to go into Kever Yosef. So those people were Tamei Meis. They would come in contact with the bones of Yosef, and therefore they couldn't bring a Korban Pesach. Another reason given is that the people who were sent after Aaron's 2 sons, Nadab and Avihu, had died, people were sent in to pull their bodies out, cousins of Aaron, of Nadab and Avihu, and they were Tamei Meis. And so either or, there were people who were upset that they couldn't bring the Korban Pesach through no fault of their own. They were doing mitzvahs. And Hashem said, Moshe says, I'll have to take this to Hashem. And Hashem replies, this is a great request, Moshe. You can bring something called Pesach Sheni, the second Pesach. And a month after Pesach, on the 14th of Iyar, they were able to bring a Korban Pesach. These people brought the Korban Pesach on Pesach Sheni, and that was a halacha that stayed in place while we had the temple as well. Anybody who couldn't make it to Jerusalem because they were far away, or they were Tamei Meis, or for various other reasons, the Gemara discusses it at length, were able to bring a Pesach Sheni. We still have a custom today. People don't say Tachnun on 14th of Iyar, and many people will eat matzah as a commemoration. It's not a halacha, it's just a custom to say, yep, we haven't forgotten this halacha that Hashem added, so to speak, to the Torah, because the people complained with a good sign. We're now ready to move. We are about to leave Midbar Sinai, the desert of Sinai, and Hashem says, we are going to pack up the Mishkan, the tabernacle, and we're going to move. And you will get a sign when to move. The Parsha says, on the day the tabernacle was set up, the cloud covered the tabernacle. There was a tent for the testimony. The cloud covered it. In the evening, there would be on it a fiery appearance until morning. So it would be the cloud would cover it, an appearance of fire at night. And whenever the cloud was lifted from atop the tent, afterwards the children of Israel would journey. So Hashem's presence was in a cloud. I don't know if there was like a cumulus storm cloud sitting on top of it, but you could sense Hashem's presence was there. And when this spiritual cloud lifted, then they knew where to pack up and go. And when the cloud rested, then we knew we were settled. And that's how they journeyed. The plan was a number of days, 11 days, to get from Har Sinai to Eretz Israel. As we're going to learn about in next week's Parsha, in Parsha Shlach, that became another 38 years. But their journeying was not haphazard. The phrase wandering Jews is put onto the people who wandered around the desert. However, they didn't actually wander aimlessly around the desert. Hashem led them where he needed to go. And in fact, they were 19 years in one place. Half the time they were in one place, other times it was a few days. But they had journeys through the desert. Not brought in this Parsha, but brought next week after they are punished for the spies bringing a bad report. And that leads us, not yet, sorry. Next, Moshe is told to make trumpets, because we need to blow trumpets to tell people, to signal to people what to do. And that we still have a remnant of this today to some degree. The Gemara talks about how a shofar was blown at various times in the temple. And a shofar was blown to tell people, it's Erev Shabbos, stop working. It's Erev Shabbos, light candles, Shabbos now, stop. In many, many cities and towns in Israel today, there's music played to tell people, Shabbos is coming, it's candlelighting time. And so over the loudspeakers, they'll play music. I wish they would just blow a shofar, because that's the original custom. It would be like really nice. But so Moshe was told to make trumpets, to give the people signs as to what they'll need to do. If they're going to wage war, they blow the trumpets. Various different times we're going to blow these trumpets. And in the temple, shofar or trumpets or both were blown at various different times for various different services. They then told, right, now it's time to break up camp. We had Chamishi, and in the second year, in the second month, on the 20th of month, the 20th of Iyar, time to move on. So about 3 weeks ago was the 20th of Iyar, almost 4 weeks ago, time to move, and they are told, let's move. And the children of Israel journeyed. They left the wilderness of Sinai. The cloud rested in the wilderness of Paran. They journeyed for the first time at the bidding of Hashem through Moshe. It's always at the bidding of Hashem through Moshe. They took it down, and the Torah tells us exactly what happened. Moshe then, now remember, Parshas Yisro, all the way back, just after we left Sinai, we got to Mount Sinai, just after we left Egypt, go through the desert, we had a few issues, we get to Sinai, and we're about to receive the Torah, and that is Parshas Yisro. Yisro, being Moshe's father-in-law, had arrived. And Yisro was now with the Jewish people. And Moshe then says to Yisro, the Torah here calls him, Vayame Moshe leChayvav ben Reuel, calls him Chayvav, the son of Reuel. He had 7 names. Yisro, by tradition, we have a tradition that he had 7 different names. He had 7 daughters. He needed a different name for each daughter. That's an aside. It's not the real reason, but he, for various reasons, Moshe, we told, had 10 names. Moshe's parents called him Tuvia. And we see that inside the Torah because it says a baby was born and it was good. It was toiv. It was good. Basia, the daughter of Paro, called Moshe Moshe because she drew him from the water. So Moshe then says to Chayvav, the son of Reuel, the Midianite, the father-in-law of Moshe, that's how we know it's Moshe's father-in-law, we're going. We're about to leave. Hashem's told us to go, and come with us. You know, it's good that you should go with us, and it'll be good for you. And Yisro said, "No, I'm not going. I'm going back to my land." And he says, so Moshe says to him, "Don't forsake us. And as much as you've known our encampment in the wilderness, you've been as eyes for us. It shall be that if you come with us, it'll be goodness with you. It'll benefit us." Yisro doesn't say what happens here, but Yisro decided to go back to Midian and teach the people of the world. Yisro was the priest of Midian, but he was a person who had investigated every single religion in the world. And he had decided there was only one real religion, and he had converted to Judaism. And but he decided he needed to go back and teach people about Hashem. And so Yisro leaves us here, and off he goes. And then we start journeying. I did say if you open your Chumashim on 786, you'll see on the right-hand side on 786, it says Shishi in the little column on the right. And you'll see there's an upside-down backward Nun. And then there's a couple of verses and an upside-down backward Nun on the other side. Towards the bottom of 786, there's a big Yud Aleph, the bottom right, the last line. There are 3 lines above that. That is what is written in a Sefer Torah. Sefer Torah's got those 2 backward nuns in it, and we will come back to that. I'll come back to discuss that Pasha. But essentially, those 2 verses, Vahi bin Saharon, is what we say. Many people have the custom, Minhag Ashkenaz certainly, we say that when we open the Aron Kodesh. Every time we open the Aron Kodesh, we say that. The first verse, when the ark would journey, Moshe would say, "Arise, and arise Hashem, and let your foes be scattered. Those who hate you flee from before you." And then when we put the Sefer Torah back, we say the next verse, "Vayinucha yoma shuva Hashem ruvos alfei Israel." When it rested, he would say, "Reside in tranquility, Hashem among the myriads of the thousands of Israel." Hashem should go with us when we go, and he should rest with us when we rest. And those 2 verses we say when we open the Aron Kodesh and when we put the Sefer Torah back. Why the nuns we will come back to once we finish the Pasha. We then have problems. We're then beset by problems. If we look, Rabbi Blackman said this the other night, on Friday night he mentioned it. Last week's Parsha we counted. It says, when we counted in last week's Parsha, in Parsha's Bamidbar, at the beginning of the Parsha, it says, Nasa es Rosh, lift up people's heads. Why do we lift up people's heads? He says, when we want to know anything in the Torah, anything in life you want to know about, always go back to the beginning, the first place you find it. And so if you want to know what a word means, why a letter's placed in that position, whatever it is, why there's a verse here like that, what does that verse mean? Go back and find that word or that phrase the first time it's mentioned in Torah. And that's the actual meaning of it. And the first time a phrase very similar to this is used is when Yosef is in jail. And the baker and the butler come to Yosef and they're very upset they've had dreams. And Yosef interprets the dreams. And Yosef says to the butler, in 3 days' time, Paro is going to lift up your head. The same words, slightly different tense, but same words. And you'll be restored to your position. And the baker who's listening to this sees this, and he has interpreted. If you look at the words in the Parsha, I'm not going to go there now, but he looks and he sees, because he's seen the butler's dream. And the interpretation of it, he says, yes, that's right, I dreamt that. So, Joseph, can you tell me my dream? And he tells him his dream. He had these 3 baskets on his head, and these birds came down and ate from the bread of it. And Joseph says to him, in 3 days' time, your head will be lifted, my words, off your shoulders. We have 2 choices in life. Whenever we are counted, lift up your head. You can either lift up your head in a positive way, or you can lift up your head in a negative way. We have 2 choices. And that's why the Torah uses that phrase to count people, because at the end of the day, it's up to us. That's what Rabbi Blackman said in a nutshell on Friday night in Shul. The rest of the Parsha is a thing. We start journeying. Now, we are in the 2nd year. We have been eating man for over a year now. We got man on the way out of Egypt, a month after we left Egypt, on the 15th of Iyar. We're now the 20th of Iyar in the 2nd year. So we're a month and a week of eating man. In fact, we'd had a whole month of eating the little bit of matzah that we took out of Egypt with us. That's what we ate for a whole month. This food was completely mystical, Kabbalistic, magical food. It had properties like no other food. There was no waste products. Whatever a person ate was absorbed perfectly into the body. Nobody needed to go to the bathroom. The food could taste like anything you wanted it to taste like, almost. A kid woke up and we had Yakira sleep over on Saturday night, and she'd fallen asleep very, very early. In fact, she fell asleep in Tamar's arms. And she put her to bed, and then she woke up later on, and she was not too upset. She was quite happy. It was about 10 o'clock, 9:30 at night. She'd had her 3 hours or so of sleep. And I tried to get her back to sleep, and I was lying with her, and she was half awake, half asleep, and suddenly she wakes up completely, and she says, I didn't have dinner before I left home. So I said, what's wrong? She says, I'm hungry. Took her downstairs. She had dinner. She had a shower because she hadn't had a shower. She went back to bed and she fell asleep till the morning. That's an almost 3-year-old. But that's a grandparent, yes, not a parent. No, the parents were happy with that, actually. She had a good night's sleep. And so here we have complainers. People complain. The people took to complaining. It was evil in the eyes of Hashem. Hashem heard their, and his wrath fled against them, and he consumed the edge of the camp. What did they complain about? So the Parsha says there, if you want to look, 788, chapter 11, verse, let's go to verse 4, Daled. V'asafsuf asher b'kirbei hisva'u tava v'yivku gam b'nei Yisrael v'yomeru mi ya'achilenu. The rabble. The rabble is those people that Moshe took out, the Erev Rav. They complained. That was among the cultivated. They craved. What did they crave? And this caused the children of Israel to weep. This was a lot of our problems, and this is a lot of our problems in the world. We have one detractor. You go to something, whatever it might be. You go to a shiur, and or Rabbi gives a drosha. It's probably a better one. And you walk out of there and you're inspired. That was phenomenal. That uplifting everything. And somebody says one word, and it just pulls the whole thing down. Yeah, it was too long. It was too short. He said X. He said Y. Whatever it might have been. And this happens in life across the board. This is what happened here. The Erev Rav just caused a little bit of a stir in the background. And then Bnei Israel, the children of Israel, wept. And they said, what do they say? Who's going to feed us meat? We want meat. Now they had quail. There was, every day they got man in the morning and quail at night. And then what did they remember? We remembered the fish in Egypt. They remembered the smoked salmon that they had in Egypt. Whatever it was. And what else did we remember? That it was free of charge. It came with no charge whatsoever. We had free food. Now we're talking about, if it was the Jewish people, they were slaves. Now, it was very easy to get fish in Egypt. You put your rod in the Nile and you pulled out a fish. So perhaps they're referring to this. What else did they remember? Cucumbers, melons, leeks, onions, and garlic. That's what they were craving. The man could taste like almost everything. There's opinions that say certain textures the man was not like, and that's possibly these foods didn't have that texture. But that's what they're craving. Now we are parched. Our life is nothing. We've got nothing but this man, this white food. I could sit there and say, I would like to eat ice cream and chocolate sauce, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And that's what the man tasted like for me. I'd like a steak and chips or whatever it was. No, they wanted the fish of Egypt, and they wanted onions and garlics and leeks and cucumbers and melons. Not exactly the food that most people want, but that's what they were complaining about. It tells us the man was like coriander. It was color of bedoilach. It was a white color. People would stroll and gather it and grind it or mill it or pound it and cook it in a pot. Its taste was like the taste of dough kneaded with oil. When the Jew descended on the camp at night, the man would descend upon it. The man would come down. And we're told it was incredible food. If a person walked out of their tent in the morning and their man was straight right there in front of them, that person knew they're doing the right thing. The neighbor who was looking out, his man wasn't there, he's looking, and he sees way in the distance out there somewhere is my man. And he walks and walks and walks and trudges and comes back and he goes, I shouted at my kids last night. I shouldn't have done that. They didn't do anything wrong. I'm going to do tshuva. Tomorrow the man's right in front of his tent for him. It was a message service to us. We knew exactly what was there. There were other messages which we'll discuss shortly. And Moshe despairs. Moshe says, why have you done to me, Hashem? What have I done wrong? These people, what have they done? Why did you put this burden on this entire people? They just complain and complain and complain. Hashem says to Moshe, you know what, Moshe, I'm going to give you a Sanhedrin. There's going to be 70 people in the camp, 70 elders, who are I'm going to come down, I'm going to put some of my essence, so to speak, into these people. We'll put some nevuah, we'll make them the leaders so that you won't have to carry this burden alone. These 70 people is brought down by several opinions that they were the people in Egypt who, when the Jewish people had straw taken away from them, they didn't meet their quota of bricks that they had to make for Paro, the people who took the beating for the Jewish people were these 70 people. This was their reward. Year 3 years later, Hashem says, okay, tomorrow you're going to just eat. And this is where he brings down, you said you want meat, you're going to get meat until it's coming out of your ears and eyes and everywhere else. And Hashem says, he says, you want meat, it's going to be for days and months and years. There's just going to be so much meat, like you've never seen before. And then suddenly Moshe gets told, hang on, there's 2 people that are prophesizing in the camp. There's 2 people running around in the camp saying prophecy. And Moshe says, it's okay, leave them. What was the problem? There were 70 people appointed to Sanhedrin. Sanhedrin is 71 people. You have to have in a court an odd number of judges because you need a majority. Every tribe, there were 12 tribes, had 6 people, 6 elders selected. So 2 of them were not going to be selected. Of the 72, 12 sixes are 72. Of the 72, 2 couldn't be parts of the Sanhedrin. And so these 2 people, Eldad and Medad, were running around the camp prophesizing. They basically said that they stood back, so to speak, because what you would do, they would pull out a lot, would say whether you are in the Sanhedrin or not. 2 of them would have a blank. And so they did not get that. Hashem then sends the quail down. He sends quail. Moshe was brought into camp, he and the elders, and a wind went forth from Hashem and blew quail from the sea and spread all over the camp. How much quail was there? A day's journey this way and a day's journey that way. You could see quail everywhere you looked. And it was 2 amas above the ground, about a meter high of quail, a day's journey each way. It was beyond what anybody could imagine. And then the final part of the Parsha is Moshe's uniqueness. Moshe was unique. Moshe was different to every other prophet. Moshe, when Hashem had come to Moshe before we got the Torah. Hashem had said to Moshe, husbands and wives need to separate. And they need to separate so they can be pure so that we can receive the Torah for 3 days. Moshe added another day. It's a whole discussion in the Gemara. After Sinai, Hashem says to Moshe, people can return to their tents. The men can return to their tents. And there, the rabbis interpret to their tents, meaning to their wives. Now time to go back. Because most people who received prophecy only received it in a quasi-dream-like state. It wasn't Hashem speaking face to face. Moshe, on his own accord, had said, Hashem speaks to me directly face to face. In order to be completely pure at all times, if a husband and wife have been together, they are impure and can't receive prophecy. One of the reasons why there are many people who will go to mikvah every day, Erev Shabbos very often, so that they can be more pure, they can daven in a level of purity. Moshe felt that he was, because Hashem could call him at any point in time, he therefore separated from his wife. And Hashem accepted this. It's one of the things that Moshe did on his own accord that Hashem accepted. The problem was Miriam, Moshe's sister. She probably had a discussion with Zipporah, and Zipporah mentioned something about it. And Miriam was upset. She was upset. She has her little brother, who she had saved his life. She had stood when he was in the basket in the Nile. She had saved his life. And here he is separated from him. And she was not happy about it. So she went to talk to Aaron, the middle child. And she had a little discussion with Aaron, is this right that Moshe separated from Zipporah? But Moshe was different. And that's what the Torah goes into here. And Hashem then gets angry with Miriam and with Aaron. And he calls them in. And he says, that's not right. You've spoken Lashon Hora. It just shows us what Lashon Hora is. Miriam didn't understand the full picture of what Moshe did. And therefore, she spoke badly about her brother. And so Miriam is now given a physical blemish of tzaras. And she has to leave the camps. We learned in last week's Parsha that people have to leave various different parts of the camp. A person who's come in contact with dead bodies is not allowed in the Hashem's part of the camp. The Shechina, where the Shechina dwells, a person with dead body is not allowed to be. A Mitzorah is not allowed to be in the next part of the camp. And somebody who's got, somebody who's come, who's got an emission, some kind of a gonorrheal emission or certain other emissions, is not allowed to be in the next camp. And a Mitzorah, a person of Tzaras, has to go out of all 3 camps. That was all mentioned in last week's Parsha. So Miriam is here. She's suffering from Tzaras. And she is out of the camp. And the Parsha ends that the people wait for her for 7 days. Aaron comes to Moshe. And he says to Moshe, you need to pray for her. She's not well. And Moshe davens for Miriam. What does he say? Kael na refa la. Hashem, please heal her. Few words. And she's healed. But she has to stay out of the camp for 7 days. And then she's admitted back. And then the people journey from Chatzeros. And they camped in the wilderness of Paran. That ends our Parsha, 136 verses. 40 verses fewer than last week's. And so we see there's a lot of toing and froing, we can call it, in this Parsha. And we see this for the rest of the book of Beha'aloscha. Next week's Parsha, Shlach. We have the spies who come back and they speak Lashon Hora about the land of Israel, and we're punished. The nation goes crazy from that. We have, in next Parsha, we have Mitzvah Chala, we have Tzitzis. The following Parsha of Parsha's Korach. Korach is a Levi. He's all upset because Moshe's brother Aaron's got the top job. Aaron's sons are the Kahanim. He didn't get a top job. He's not happy. Korach is one of the richest people in the Jewish people. He was embarrassed that he'd been shaved and waved by Aaron. And he comes up with this whole thing and he complains and the earth swallows him up. And we'll get to all of this. I'm just trying to show you how we complain. There are more complaints, that people complain against Aaron, and then Aaron has to prove himself that he's Hashem's chosen one, where all the leaders of the tribes have to bring their staff, and Aaron's staff gets blossoms and almonds on it to show that he was chosen by Hashem. We then go to Parshas Chukas, where we told about the red heifer, and then Miriam dies, and what happens after Miriam dies? There's no more water, but the water was there in Miriam's merit. Moshe hits the rock. Moshe and Aaron are punished, and they're not allowed to go into Israel. One thing after another. Then we battle with Sichon and with Og. We have all these wars when we're going in. We get to Parshas Balak. Bilam comes and tries to curse the Jewish people. The end of that, we get Zimri and the Midianite girl Cosby, and Pinchas kills him. This book of Bamidbar is a whole range of stories about what happened in the desert. It was not plain sailing. And a lot of what happened in the desert was us complaining and us using our mouths inappropriately.
The desert song.
The Sanhedrin that you mentioned, yes. The way I understood it, it was a court of law.
Correct. They became a court of law.
82 became 80.
72 became 70, plus Moshe was 71.
Is that what it was?
Yes,
plus
yes.
Moshe. Okay. I was trying to get, how do you get an odd number out
yes,
of
so that's right. So any court, any based in we have, the simplest based in is 3 judges. We have a based in of 23, or we have a based in, a Sanhedrin of 71. Each of them, and each of them does various levels of judgment and hearings and the like. A court of 23 can hear capital cases. The modern Western judicial systems, in many ways, are based on that process, because you had lower courts who would handle things, the appeal process and the like, and that was all the way this was structured. So all these discussions in America right now about the Supreme Court kind of falls all the way back onto this. So maybe they should have, they're trying to, the Democrats are now saying they want to have a bigger Supreme Court because they want to load it with more Democrats. Whatever. That's not what they're saying, that's what the intent is. But maybe they should just go to 71 and do it properly, and let's have the Sanhedrin back. So let's go back to page 786. And as we discussed, on 786, at Shishi in the Parsha, there is a break. There are these 2 backwards upside down nuns, and effectively they're like brackets, like parentheses around these 2 verses. So what I would like to discuss is why. I mean, in a Sefer Torah, to write something like that seems a bit odd. Every single thing in the Sefer Torah is there for a reason. So let's look at some of what is brought down as to why we have these verses written like that. And it's brought down in a Gemara in Shabbos. Gemara in Shabbos at the beginning of the 16th chapter. Gemara in Shabbos is a long Masechta. This is on page 115, Kuf Tes Vav. Discusses what the Mishnah starts off right at the beginning of this 16th chapter. The Mishnah says, what are you allowed to save if there's a fire on Shabbos? It's talking about holy scriptures you can save and various other things. And that's what the discussion's about. What am I allowed to save if I need to save something on Shabbos? If there's a fire in the building, what can I save there? At the bottom of 115, it discusses 115b. Right near the bottom it says, Ton Rabbanan, the rabbis taught in a brisa. Now a brisa, the way Gemara works is you have a Mishnah, and then you have the Gemara, the Talmud. The whole thing's called Talmud, but the Gemara part of it is a discussion of what this Mishnah told us. The 6 books of Mishnah were the teachings of the rabbis of the time of the destruction of the temple and soon after that, which were codified by Rebbe. Rebbe Yehuda Nasi codified the Mishnah. He brought all the 6 books together, and it was all the discussions that the rabbis had at the time on the various different laws around the way the Torah works, what we call oral Torah. Rebbe came along and he edited, codified what goes into the Mishnah, but there were many, many discussions that he didn't put in. Those are brought by Gemara. The Gemara then comes along to explain the Mishnah and to expand on it. And what the Gemara does is it often uses a proof from what we call a brisa, which is a statement from those people of the rabbinic times, a teaching of those people of the Mishnah times, but it wasn't put into Mishnah, or a Tosefta, which is written down as well. They're two areas that they didn't include. One is included in the book of Tosefta, that's outside of the Mishnah, and the others are the Brises. And that's brought, these were discussed orally, and that's brought in Gemara to prove a case. We also use verses. Where do you find this in the Torah? How do you back this up, etc. That's really what Gemara is about. And then on top of that, the Bavli's also got stories, Agadata, background, what happened in the Torah. So it's a blend of everything, and it's really the at school you used to have study guides, summaries of things. The Mishnah is really just a study guide of what was discussed. You need to go and discuss that in detail. The Gemara came along and they codified it, but this is really the discussion that happened in the Beis Medrash. This rabbi said this rabbi said this. They have an argument with each other. Where does it come from? How do you know this? What have you got to prove this? No, you're wrong because we use that word somewhere else. And this is the backwards and forward discussion. That's what it was. That's the Gemara we're learning. We need to understand it with all the commentaries on the page and elsewhere, but generally that's how Gemara works. So we have this Gemara that's discussing what you can save on Shabbos in a fire, and it says, yep, you can save a Sefer Torah. So the Brisa says, Tana Rabbanan, there's taught in the Brisa, our verse, Vahibin Sahar Haron Vayomi Moshe, when the ark would journey, Moshe said, etc. And it says here, Parsha Zoi, this section, Asala Kadosh Baruch Hu, the Holy One, blessed is He, made Simanios Milmala Lamata, signs, symbols above it and below it. When this verse is written in the Torah, the Gemara says in this Brisa, Hashem put these signs in the Torah for us. It doesn't say what the signs are. Where does the nuns come from? The Gemara doesn't tell us. Commentaries in that discuss why nuns, and we'll see how we go with time. We will probably get to discuss that. Why? Loiman, this is to teach us over the page of the Gemara, She'en Zay Makoma, that it's not in its proper place. These two verses should not be here. They should be 50 parshios earlier. There's discussion exactly how it works, because in our Gemara it really works out to be 49, but 49 is approximately 50 verses earlier. Now Nun, one of the reasons brought down why the letter Nun and why it's upside down, because it's out of place to put upside down. Nun is the number for 50. The gematria of the letter Nun is 50. So go back 50 chapters.
Wow.
50. What we call a parsha is not Parshas Beha'aloscha. That's a borrowed term in some ways. If you look in your Chumash, there's a break before the first Nun and after the second Nun.
Oh.
If you turn back turn back 2 pages to 782, excuse me, you'll see there after the fourth line has got 3 words. It says Hashem b'yad Moshe.
Yeah.
Then there starts with an aleph. Okay, that happens to be a new chapter in the verses. But towards the bottom of the page, then there's another break.
Yeah.
That section where between the 2 breaks is a parsha. So you go back 50 of those. In last week's parsha, the Birkas Kohanim was 3 separate parshas. The 3 verses have got gaps. If you go back last week's parsha, you'll see there's gaps. Each of those is a parsha. So you go back 50 of those. It is at the point where we're told about the travels in Parshas Bamidbar, and so go back 50 parshas, and that's where you'll find where this really belongs. So the Gemara says that's one reason, and then Rebbe is Rebbe Yehuda Nasi, who wrote the Mishnah. Interesting, you find this many times. Rebbe himself says this in a brisa which is outside of Mishnah, so he didn't put his own statement into the Mishnah. He left it outside. Rebbe says, Lo min Hashem who's there. It's not for this reason. That's not the reason why that these signs are here. The Gemara, the Torah, Hashem put these signs in the Torah for a different reason. Why? Rather, because this section is a separate book unto itself. So there's actually, and he brings, and I won't carry on in the Gemara fully, but he brings a verse from Proverbs chapter 9 verse 1, beginning of chapter 9 says, Wisdom has built her house, she has hewn out 7 pillars. 7 pillars tells us that they're actually what we call a chumash, Chamisha Chumshei Torah, the 5 books of the Torah, is actually 7. How does it work? You've got Bereshis, you've got Shmois, you've got Vayikra, you've got Bamidbar up until the first Nun, you've got Bamidbar in the 2 Nuns, the 2 verses there, got the rest of Bamidbar, and then you've got Devarim. So Bamidbar is actually 3 separate books. One of those books happens to be 2 verses. That's according to Rebbe.
Too hard to absorb.
It's very easy to absorb. Instead of 5, we've got 7. Because 7 is such, as we discussed so many times, because 7 is such an important number in this world. Okay, and so then we go through a whole discussion here. And then the Gemara says, so who disagrees with Rebbe? The Gemara is now trying to sound, okay, because we had what we call a Tanakama, the first Tana, the silent Tana, who says to teach us that it's not in its proper place. And Rebbe says, no, because it's its own book. Who's the one who says it's not in its proper place? Oh, that's Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel says that because we learn in another brisa, this is the way Gemara works. So now we're going to another source. How do we know this was him? Because he says that this section was uprooted from its original place, the 50 parshas earlier, and written here to separate between one punishment, a first punishment, and a second punishment. We were punished. We did the wrong thing. And he says, what's the first punishment? What's the second punishment? They traveled for 3 days, and then they complained. And regarding this one, another Rabbi Chama, the son of Rabbi Chanina, says, within 3 days of their setting out from Mount Sinai, they turned away from Hashem. And where's its proper place? Within the topic of the banners. When the Torah was talking about the way we camped with our banners, that's where it should have been. That's the 50 verses earlier. So this whole Gemara is discussing what is going on. Why do we have these nuns? What do we need all of this for? The next section in the Gemara goes back to talking about what can we remove from a fire. And it basically says, Gemara attempts, it says, Tashma, come and learn from a brisa. In regard to Sefer Torah that's been worn out, if there is within it sufficient writing to gather 85 letters, then that is acceptable as a Sefer Torah. 85 letters is a Sefer Torah, therefore you can save that Sefer Torah. Okay, we'll come back to that.
And what do you do if there aren't 85 letters? What do you do with the
then you don't have to save it. So the Sefer Torah that has got one letter that's pasul, we don't read from it. We will put it away, and we will. You'll sometimes find in the shul Sefer Torah that are wrapped with the gartel on the outside of them. That means that Sefer Torah hasn't been. We found a problem; it hasn't been checked. It needs to be checked and corrected. You can correct most Sefer Torah because the way they're written, the parchment is not one long parchment. You can fix up. You can take out a section and sew it together, and you can rewrite a section if you have to. Or you can change words. It depends what the problem is.
And one that isn't salvageable?
It has to be buried.
It's got to be buried.
Yes. Now, there are certain cases, interestingly enough, where you'll find that a Sefer Torah might have to be burnt. There have been stories around, going back many, many years, probably, these go back to the time of Reform, when a Sefer, I brought with me, I'm not going to go into now, but I brought with me all my notes on Hilchos Sefer Torah, the laws of writing a Sefer Torah. And in there I've got several stories written up about things. When a Sefer writes a Sefer Torah, there's various different things that he has to take on. Every time he writes Hashem's name, he has to say, I'm writing a certain phrase, I'm writing the name of Hashem. This word is being written. And there are many Sofrim that will go to the mikveh. They'll have a mikveh in their house, or they'll gather together in a like a base medrash together where they're all writing. There's a mikveh there. Some of them will go to the mikveh in the morning every time. Some of them will even go to mikveh every time they write Hashem's name. There were stories that there was Sifrei Torah for sale in America, in other places, that rabbis would go to, and they'd look at the Sefer Torah straight away. You have to be an absolute expert. And they'd say, no, that Sefer Torah is pasul. And they'd say, look, How do you know? It's beautiful. He says, yes, because Hashem's name is written exactly the same. It's like perfect calligraphy. It's if it's been printed with a computerized printer, a modern printer. You can see it's written because the person writing that Sefer Torah was a calligrapher, not a Yireh Shamayim, not somebody who had fear of heaven. Because if you had fear of heaven, when you write Hashem's name, it would be written slightly differently. There'd be a little bit of shake perhaps in the Sofer's hand, because you know what you're doing. Somebody who's writing it as in a fraudulent kind of way is trying to sell that as a piece of art, so to speak. That can't be a valid Sefer Torah. The other way that you can also see it is that often people will commission a sofer to write a Sefer Torah, but they will leave out the last few verses or several letters, whatever it might be, and write that. They often will write the outside of the letters and it gets filled in. And sometimes the person who owns the Sefer Torah, his mitzvah is to, everyone has a mitzvah. The last mitzvah brought by the Sefer Chinuch, the book that codifies all of the mitzvahs in the Torah, the way the Torah is written, brings the last mitzvah 613, is to write a Sefer Torah for yourself. Most of us have not got the ability to write a Sefer Torah. And so therefore people will get a sofer to write on their behalf, but they will finish it. It might be that the sofer holds their hand and does it with them. It might be that the sofer has to raise that part of the letter and redo it if it's not good enough, but there'll be differences. You'll always notice some subtle differences in some letters, particularly when Hashem's name's written, and that's how you can tell that it wasn't written by Yireh Shamayim. There's little clues of that. So,
the same apply to when you interfere,
or not as strict, but yes, very much so. The halachas of, so we call it a stam. Sefer Torah, Tefillin, Mezuzahs. A sofer who writes those three things is sofer stam. And there's very similar halachas that apply to all three.
Is the ink they use black?
Yes, has to be black ink, and there's special ink.
Is there training?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, for sure. It's a lot of training. It's. I mean, you have to be skillful in the base case, and then you have to learn all the halachas. The training, it's intense training to learn all the halachas, and then you have to have a very deep neshama to be able to apply it properly. There's a lot of effort that goes into it.
You have to be artistic.
Absolutely, you have to, because you've got to be consistent. And now, I mean, I'll give you an example of mezuzahs. In tefillin as well. You can buy cheap mezuzahs in tefillin. They're written very quickly. The little tiny small mezuzahs, they often find mistakes with them because there's not enough effort put into it. And Ashkenaz Sefer Torah is generally about a third more expensive than a Sephardi Sefer Torah. For the parchment itself, the Sephardi Sefer Torah, the case that it comes in is magnificent, heavy case. And often they use a thicker parchment as well, because the parchment is two parts. And old Sifrei Torah often used double, both parts, and was much heavier. The modern ones are much lighter. They also used to coat them with stuff, so they were heavier. To do Hagbah, to pick up a Sefer Torah in the old, big, heavy ones is very difficult sometimes. The more modern ones are slightly smaller and lighter. But an Ashkenaz Sefer Torah, on certain letters, a little tagin, little chutchis, what English word to use, little marks on certain letters, and they all mean something, and there's a lot of depth to them. When the sofer of an Ashkenaz Sefer Torah is writing it, he's writing them together with his writing. The font is a little bit harder font to write, it's more elaborate. The Sephardi Sefer Torah is a little bit easier to write. It's a simpler font, and the tagin are usually written by another sofer. So it's much quicker to write. And so therefore it takes longer. So you're paying for the length of time it's taking to write that Sefer Torah, mezuzahs, tefillin. It's an interesting question. If you buy a mezuzah that's written Sephardi style, or you move into a house, and the halacha is if a Jewish person sells a house to another Jewish person, you leave your mezuzahs. There's ways you can change it, but you're supposed to leave your mezuzahs up for the person. If you've got very fancy mezuzahs, you don't have to leave those, but you replace them with regular, proper kosher ones, of course. But if you move into a house that's got really good Sephardi mezuzahs, they're slightly different to Ashkenaz mezuzahs. What do you do? So generally we say you can leave them. But if you need to replace them, you can, whatever you do. But you ask a question about that, but they are different. The Sephardi Sefer Torah is upright, and it's open on the bima is flat, and it sits in the Aron Kodesh, standing up but flat. Ashkenaz Sefer Torah sits at an angle in the Aron Kodesh generally, and on the bima is angled. So there's a difference. Similarly with our mezuzahs. There's a dispute whether mezuzah should be upright or like
Or
that. So
across.
we do it at an angle.
We do.
Generally. If you're not sure if it's the wrong angle, you put it straight. The Sephardi mezuzah is straight. Just slightly different customs.
Amazing.
That's not the topic of our shir, but it was just
But
a
it's
good
really
aside.
interesting.
Okay, so we've discussed that this section, Vayi ben Sarah, is a separate book. There's 7 books in the Torah. We discussed that is to separate between 2 punishments. So, Bnei Israel are criticized for leaving Har Sinai too quickly. And then we get the complaint of Misonanim, those who complained about the man that they got free fish in Egypt, and there was garlic and onions and cucumbers and melons. And so Vayi ben Sarah separates between these two. It says we can't have all this negativity in the Sefer Torah. We need to separate. Some commentators look at these verses and they describe that the Aaron that was leading the Jewish people, the Aaron led us through the desert. It would get up, and the Aaron carried the family of Kahas. They didn't carry it carried them as a protection. So Moshe is saying, arise up Hashem. The Torah says, Hashem, please get up and protect us. Scatter the enemies. That's what the verses say. We say, when the ark would travel, Moshe would say, arise Hashem, let your foes be scattered, and those who hate you flee from before you. In other words, protect us Hashem. As we go through life, please protect us. And so these inverted nuns are like bracketing this section of the Torah and saying, Hashem, give us your protection. It's a special, like, I guess, a highlight to say there's something special here about Hashem's protection. Interestingly enough, the letter Nun, we say, the Gemara in Brachos brings, you should say Ashrei, the chapter of Tehillim, which starts Tehillim David, chapter 145, which we say 3 times a day. You should say 3 times a day for Hashem's protection. Why? Because there's a verse in there that says, Pasach es yedecha umasbir lecho charatzon. You open your hand and you help everybody to have the ratzon that they should be able to live in the way Hashem wants us to live. We should be able to live properly. Hashem will protect us with that. In that chapter of Tehillim, it goes through the Aleph base, except the letter Nun is missing. You don't have the letter Nun there. And the Gemara brings why? Because Nun is related to Nefila, to falling down. It is mentioned there because it does mention it's kind of hidden in there. But the actual verse for the letter Nun is not there, because Nun is about falling down. So the inverted nuns are here to some degree to show that Hashem's going to overturn our downfall. Hashem's going to give us merit. And the merit of the Sefer Torah is what's going to carry us. By giving us the sign, even though that nun is missing, even though nun stands for falling, for the feel, for going backwards, no, Hashem will turn us around all the time. As I said before, we say Vayi ben Sarah and we say V'nechiyoma when we open our Aron Kodesh and take out the Sefer Torah and when we put it back. So they're distinct. It's a totally separate section. Now, we said that 85 letters is the number of letters that one needs to save a Sefer Torah. If you've got a Sefer Torah with 85 letters, then that Sefer Torah should be saved, if you can. Now, let's count all the letters in those 2 verses.
Wow.
85 letters. Those 2 verses are 85 letters. A whole book of the Torah is 85 letters. Sorry?
Including the 2 nuns?
Good question, I don't know. I didn't count them.
It says nun.
The Gemara brings it. The Gemara brings it. I haven't counted them, but I should. We really should. We should not. We don't just take things at face value. Okay, so what is 85? What word represents 85? Peh, the mouth. Peh, hey. Peh is 80 and hey is 5. 85 is the gematria for Peh. And so Vayi ben Sarah, which is 85 letters, is the tefillah. We said, Moshe said a tefillah for his sister Miriam. We say davening. How do we daven? With our mouth. How do we learn Torah? When we learn Torah, it's brought down. It's actually a good thing. If you want to remember something, most people remember visually. Rabbi Eli Stefansky gives Daf Yomi Shir. It's now the biggest Daf Yomi Shir in the world. And he's doing it using a lot of video and photos and things. We're learning Chulin at the moment. Chulin is all about shechita. It's all about the ability to eat regular food. Meat and milk will be coming up and various other things. Right now we're doing the second chapter. The first two chapters are all about shechita. And he's using AI videos and drawings to show you exactly how shechita works, how it has to work, which pipe you have to cut, where it is. It just brings it to life. Most people learn visually. But what the Gemara says for learning Torah, if you want to learn Torah, don't read the Torah with your eyes. Read it with your mouth so that your ears can hear. Same thing with davening. When you daven loud enough that you can hear. Not that your person next to you can hear. You need to hear the words yourself. Hashem can hear inside of you. Hashem knows what you're thinking. But for your own benefit, so you can understand more, so it can get ingrained more within you, say things out loud. So when you're learning, one of the reasons why you walk into a base medrash, and it's not a library. There's a cacophony of noise. There's sound. There's people discussing, questioning, arguing, walking across the room, talking to another person, getting an answer for this. It's an amazing place. You go to a big base medrash where there's 300-400 people sitting in there. It's just incredible. You can't hear yourself think. That's literally what it's like. And therefore, because of that, you speak louder, and the next person speaks louder. It gets louder and louder. But that's what it's about. You need to hear the words of Torah. And so we need to hear what's going on. The power of speech is so, so powerful, both positively and negatively. We had the Misonin, the complainers. What did they complain about? The man. They raised their voice. They said a few negative things. And the rest of the Jewish people started complaining about the man. We had Miriam used her mouth. She spoke Lashon Hora. In the next week's Parsha, we have the spies speaking Lashon Hora. We have Bilam in Parshas Balak talking Lashon Hora. We have Korach, Parshas Korach, talking negatively about things, bringing proofs. We'll discuss that, please, in a few weeks. We have various different things. Through the Torah, speech is used continually. We can use speech positively or negatively. We all know that the reason the temple was destroyed because of sinas chinam. But the Chofetz Chaim brings, what's that baseless hatred? What's this sinas chinam, this baseless hatred? It's the way we speak to and about each other. Rabbi Akiva's students were told because they couldn't honor each other properly. They couldn't give each other cover. They didn't speak nicely to each other. That's what it's all about. Miriam said these, from our regular perspective, regular human beings in the world today, Miriam said Lashon Hora about her brother Moshe. She was trying to be helpful. She wasn't being negative. And Hashem said, no. You spoke negatively. You didn't have the full facts. You don't know the whole picture. Don't say it if you don't know the whole picture. But along comes Moshe and he says a few simple words. Kel na rafan na. Hashem, please heal her. And Hashem healed Miriam. All we need to do is use our words in a positive way, and Hashem will heal us. Hashem will get rid of all the nonsense in the world, and will bring Mashiach speedily in our time.
Right.